Statements by scientists are not necessarily statements of science. When Carl Sagan began his famous television series with a statement that ran like this: "The cosmos is all there is, was, and ever shall be." That's a statement by a scientist. It's not a statement of science. It's a statement of his philosophical belief. But the trouble is that scientists in our contemporary world, they have such authority that any scientist who makes a statement, people tend to think it's got the authority of science behind it. And we need to learn to distinguish. And Richard Feynman, who won the Nobel Prize for Physics, made a marvelous statement that we need to listen to. "I believe that the scientist looking at problems out of their field is just as dumb as the next guy." Now that applies to me, because you see, I'm not talking about pure mathematics. I hope you've realized that already. And in that sense, in order to have a dialogue in public, we've got to go outside our fields. But there are certain things we've got to do if we do that. Everybody has to do that. Otherwise, life would be very boring. But we've got to check, if I move outside my field and make a statement, then I've got to check that it's got some sort of authority. And I want to illustrate this by the book title, Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, which is a bestseller. The word delusion is a psychiatric term. Now, when I first read the book, and I've read it many times in several languages in order to debate Richard, I noticed the word delusion is a psychiatric term, and Richard is not a psychiatrist. Now, that's very important to realize that. He's making a statement that God is a delusion. And I'm not a psychiatrist either, so what do? I decide to read what psychiatrists say about this. And I discovered, when I read the president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists at the time, Andrew Sims, that he doesn't regard God as a delusion at all. And Dawkins is ignoring the actual scientific, psychological, epidemiological studies of the connection, the correlation between belief in God and human well-being. Now that's very interesting, because Dawkins is claiming to be a scientist when he says these things. And many people were quite angry, actually, in their writings when they discovered that his work on this is not scientific at all. It falls apart. Similarly, Stephen Hawking, this statement by a brilliant scientist. He was just ahead of me at Cambridge all those years ago. I remember him. And he's light years ahead of me in his mathematical ability. But he said religion is a fairy story for those afraid of the dark. That's a statement by an astrophysicist, but it's not a statement of science. And I was asked to comment on it by one of the newspapers, I think, in which it was published, one of our daily newspapers in the UK. So I asked them, did they want a one-liner? And they said, we'd love a one-liner. I said, okay, atheism is a fairy story for those afraid of the light. Now you see, you're clapping and you shouldn't really. Do you know why? Because the point I've been making is that these are statements by scientists, but they're not statements of science.